No one ever said being a Jedi was glamorous.
In the mid-90s, the market for LucasArts' big breadwinner, the adventure genre, was becoming soft. Despite amazing follow-ups like The Secret of Monkey Island's LeChuck's Revenge in 1991 and Maniac Mansion's Day of the Tentacle in 1993, another genre was beginning to dominate the industry, with early cult successes like Castle Wolfenstein paving the way for vanguards like Doom. It was becoming obvious that the first-person shooter was the next likely genre to explode. In February of 1995, LucasArts entered the new perspective with Dark Forces, the very first FPS to be integrated into the Star Wars universe. Although panned as a Doom clone, Dark Forces was surprisingly good. Developed using a souped-up version of Doom's code dubbed the Jedi engine, structures could now be stacked on top of other structures to create complex multi-level buildings. The engine also employed INF code triggers that allowed for a variety of applications, like having multiple switches connected to doors or consoles, as well as dialogue triggers when certain events or objectives were completed.
This is too easy. Now to get to my ship.
Dark Forces was one of the earliest shooters that attempted to revolve itself around a strong plot. Unlike many of its predecessors, which used humor, gore, or exaggeration, Dark Forces tried to keep the action and atmosphere as realistically close to the Star Wars universe as possible. As Kyle Katarn, a former Imperial agent turned rebel mercenary for hire, you were charged with intercepting plans for a new space station vital to the Empire. By assaulting an Imperial base, Katarn allowed the rebellion to possess a chunk of the infamous Death Star schematics.
This could be interesting.
Shortly after the Battle of Yavin, Katarn and his pilot accomplice Jan Ors were contacted by rebel matriarch Mon Mothma and tasked with a very important mission. Rebellion forces discovered a completely new type of Imperial soldier called the Dark Trooper, which was a diabolical scheme heralded by General Rom Mak. The trail of the Dark Trooper project led Katarn through many locales, such as the Gromus Mines, the Imperial city of Coruscant, Jabba the Hutt's luxury yacht, the Star Jewel, and finally, the Imperial starship Arkhammer. In the process of unraveling the mystery, Katarn crossed paths with several familiar faces, such as Rebel General Maydean and bounty-hunting superstar Boba Fett. Eventually, Katarn was able to infiltrate the Arkhammer's defenses and face General Mak himself. Dark Forces benefited from the fairly recent CD-ROM format, allowing for in-game cutscenes as well as lengthy, high-quality audio tracks. The player followed a linear mission structure dispatched by fellow rogue Jan Ors, who accepted the task of flying Katarn's ship, the Moldy Crow. Katarn could choose from a variety of weapons and tools. Many movement restrictions of the genre were also lifted, giving the player the ability to crouch, jump, and look up and down. In addition, Dark Forces was one of the first to offer alt-fire modes on weaponry. The level design itself was also very dynamic for the time. Instead of long, linear hallways, Dark Forces featured multi-leveled environments with elements like conveyor belts, flowing rivers, and rotating fans. Dark Forces required the player to solve more puzzles and manipulate the environment more than prior first-person shooters. Although Dark Forces had a great reception, ranking as the 11th best-selling game between 1993 and 1999, it received a mixed reception from fans. Many people dismissed it as unoriginal, some deemed the lack of multiplayer inexcusable, while still others scoffed at its lack of a lightsaber. At the very least, Dark Forces is due some respect for its pivotal place in the galaxy. It went on to inspire a graphic novel, an audio drama, and a number of sequels. Hasbro's Dark Trooper toy is one of the few expanded characters to be immortalized with an action figure. 2 years passed, and LucasArts sought to transform Dark Forces into a fan's dream, allowing you to manipulate Jedi powers in a 3D environment. Dark Forces 2 Jedi Knight was released on October 9, 1997, and gave players just that. The basics were tuned up to fit contemporaries like Quake. Both the 3D environments and audio were amplified, featuring live-action cutscenes. These cinemas featured the first legitimate filming of Jedi combat since Episode 6, 14 years earlier. Jedi Knight picked up shortly after the events of Return of the Jedi. Kyle Katarn had been looking for leads regarding his father's death. Turns out he was slain by a dark Jedi known as Jarek and his circle of disciples, and they were on their way to discovering the Valley of the Jedi, a nexus point of the Force. Kyle soon discovered an old lightsaber in his father's workshop, and in true spaghetti western style, vowed to hunt down his father's 7 killers one by one, while unearthing untapped power within himself. Along the way, Kyle had to make important choices, which eventually led him down different paths through 21 varied levels. He faced the Dark Jedi Yoon, the twins Gork and Pick, Maw, Bok, Jarek's right hand Saris, and finally Jarek himself. Kyle's decisions throughout the game dictated what ending he saw. He either rid the galaxy of Jarek's threat and erected a statue of his father on the planet of Ruusan, or challenged the Dark Jedi for power and became Emperor of the Imperial Remnant. Considering the storylines of the sequels, the light side was clearly the correct path in keeping with the lore of the license. Jedi powers were divided into 3 categories: neutral, light, and dark. As Kyle advanced along his journey, he acquired force points that he could allocate to any number of abilities that fell into these 3 categories. Following along the same concept, Jedi Knight was also one of the first games developed that featured a gauge that swayed from light or dark depending on the player's actions. If Kyle took the high road and opted to help people, he was guided more to the light side. If he gave into his hatred, then he fell deeper into darkness. Eventually, he had to make a definitive choice between the two. This concept made its way through several levels of change, possibly making its most profound impact on the Knights of the Old Republic series. Force powers aside, Jedi Knight also gave fans another aspect of Jedi play that they had been craving: multiplayer. Now players could engage each other as Jedi and battle through a number of different areas, or attain different objectives in various games like Battleground Jedi or Canyon Oasis. Although plagued with lag and various technical glitches, multiplayer was still welcomed by fans with open arms. Dark Forces 2 Jedi Knight truly raised the bar for the series. It achieved critical acclaim and offered something fans had been wanting for a long time. In some senses, it wiped the Dark Forces slate clean and began an entirely new saga. 4 months later, LucasArts released the expansion Mysteries of the Sith. The bonus pack altered a variety of gameplay mechanics and added additional plot content. Technically, there were a lot of internal changes made to the game by refining the Sith engine used to run it. Weapons and powers were added, and the light-dark quality was abandoned. Changes were made to multiplayer as well, including several new modes. Additionally, players could now follow in the footsteps of Mara Jade, a very popular character in the expanded universe created originally for the novel Heir to the Empire by Timothy Zahn. Although Katarn made an obligatory appearance, players had the opportunity to play as Jade for a short time. The plot itself followed Mara, a student of Katarn, as she searched for her lost teacher, culminating in events that set up the next chapter in Kyle's story. In March of 2002, LucasArts and Activision released what some fans consider the finest Jedi game to date. Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Outcast. Technically, Dark Forces 3 was initially only available for the PC, but was ported to the Mac, Xbox, and Nintendo GameCube later that same year. As in the expansion Mysteries of the Sith, the live-action Katarn was replaced with a digitized likeness and played out his story through in-game cutscenes. The Sith engine was scrapped for the Quake 3 Team Arena engine, which featured both single and multiplayer modes. A force meter now measured the amount it cost to use force powers. When abilities were leveled up, they became more efficient and required less power to use. A more complex combat system was introduced, with 3 different stances and various combos that corresponded to each. The story continued 2 years after the conclusion of Mysteries of the Sith and hinged directly upon its predecessor's ending. Katarn had abandoned the ways of the Jedi in favor of his trusty old blaster. He and Jan began working as mercenaries for the New Republic. On a mission to infiltrate an apparently abandoned outpost on Kejim, Katarn discovered a secretive operation involving lightsaber crystals. The duo fled to Artus Prime, where Jan was captured by a dark Jedi known as Dasan, and his accomplice Tavian. Katarn then embarked on an intriguing adventure featuring household names like Bespin's ruler Lando Calrissian and Luke Skywalker. Eventually, Kyle confronted Tavian and Dasan, concluding in a great battle at the Jedi Temple. Critically, Outcast was very well received. Gaming magazines and fans both enjoyed it, finding very little fault with the advancements made since Jedi Knight. Outcast has also amassed a huge following, possibly adding to the anomalous fame of Kyle Katarn, some fans declaring it one of the best Star Wars games ever created. Sadly, Mark Hamill did not perform the dialogue for Luke, but Billy D. Williams did provide the voice of Lando.
All right, say goodbye to this wretched hive of scum and villainy, and hello to Cloud City.
Jedi Outcast marked the final game in which our hero, Kyle Katarn, took a central playable role. The sequel to the popular Outcast arrived in stores on September 17, 2003, and featured a brand new, customizable protagonist. Powered again by the modified Quake 3 engine used for Jedi Knight 2, Jedi Academy was once again about refinement. Early in development, it was decided that Kyle Katarn would not be considered for the main character. After climbing the ranks of the Jedi twice, finding a plausible way for Kyle to have to ascend in the Order a third time, or begin the game with a large selection of mastered powers, proved too difficult or unbelievable. The The new hero, Jaden Korr, was a student of Katarn's at the Jedi Academy. His or her race, gender, and saber color was yours to choose. The customization had little impact on the plot, but added a new dimension to the Jedi Knight saga. After a short introduction, missions became far less linear than previous installments. This allowed the player to align levels in whichever order he or she decided, with little correlation between the different missions. Although this added a sense of variety, it also stripped the sequence of a detailed, overarching story, giving many of the quests a similar level of relevance. Combat was even further refined. In addition to constructing a lightsaber, Jedi Academy also featured several new combat styles. Students could wield 2 sabers, a double-bladed saber, or become an expert in a single blade. Players could customize their force powers by focusing on various abilities as they leveled up. Academy also featured new multiplayer modes and allowed players to choose a nearly complete list of characters from both Outcast and Academy. As a budding new student at the Jedi Academy on Yavin 4, the player was placed under the tutelage of a gray-streaked Kyle Katarn. In training, Jaden befriended another young apprentice named Rosh Pennon, who accompanied him throughout most of his training at the Academy. As an eager apprentice, Korr was given a number of missions, eventually revealing a mysterious secret society known as the Cult of Ragnos. Led by Desan's former protege Tavian, the cult was intent on resurrecting the spirit of the powerful Sith Lord Marka Ragnos, using an ancient artifact to drain and release Force energy. Jaden was faced with a decision similar to Katarn's ultimatum in Jedi Knight. Regardless of prior playstyle, a definitive decision whether to follow the path of the light or turn to the dark side was required, which slightly altered the end of the game.
You may be a Jedi Knight now, but you still must beware of the dark side.
Although considered a worthy sequel, Academy certainly had its share of cons. Although the layout and structure of the game was well received, critics were generally disappointed with the visual presentation, coupled quite frequently with poor AI. Regardless of whether Academy was an apt sequel to Outcast, it concluded the Jedi Knight saga. Aside from brief cameos in Lethal Alliance and Empire at War, Kyle has all but vanished from games. Many of the games inspired add-ons or modifications that attempted to enhance the experience. Yves Borkmans developed a mod for the original Dark Forces game, which eventually earned him a spot on the programming team for Jedi Knight. Another mod named Movie Battles took the customized Quake 3 engine used in Outcast and Academy to recreate infamous fights waged throughout the 2 trilogies. It virtually spun off into its own game and even spawned a sequel. Given all the subjectivity surrounding the Jedi Knight saga, one thing cannot be understated. Kyle Katarn was a remarkable hero. He is the only Star Wars character created for a video game to earn himself solid footing in the expanded universe canon. Kyle has appeared in more games than many Star Wars protagonists, as well as piles of fiction including several book series, numerous comics, 3 graphic novels that were then adapted into audio dramatizations, and has even had his likeness captured in several miniatures created by Wizards of the Coast. In Episode 7, we'll look upon two entries in the Star Wars saga unlike any others. The first is the only video game ever based directly upon an expanded universe novel, and the second shattered the boundary between Star Wars fan and video game fan.